One Direction's explosive success, according to Niall Horan, taught him a valuable lesson that he still applies today. Never undervalue your audience. The singer and coach on The Voice reflected on the band's quick ascent and years of sold-out performances, sharing how that early experience influenced his perspective on celebrity and served as a reminder that every filled arena exists only because fans keep coming. In an episode of the VoizHub podcast, Horan spoke openly about celebrity, thankfulness, and maintaining perspective. He considered how his perspective on life and music had been influenced by touring, success, and years of fame. According to Niall, he has never forgotten how brittle success can be. Additionally, the degree to which it depends on the fans' attendance. He remarked, "Over the course of our career, we had this thing, and I still have it now, where we're just happy to be anywhere. When I look out into these crowded arenas, I realize that if you didn't purchase tickets, the entire space would be vacant. You must cling to that emotion. You're done if you stop being grateful." From the beginning, that way of thinking kept us grounded, and it continues to do so now. Fans of One Direction get a unique glimpse into how Liam Payne, Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, Zayn Malik, and Horan handled the extraordinary scope of their teenage popularity thanks to this perspective. Almost immediately, stadiums all around the world were sold out. The boy band was doing well all around the world. According to Niall, their mindset behind the scenes was influenced by a profound understanding that everything may simply vanish. Today, as a solo artist, he is guided by the same mindset. He has learned to trust his own instincts, despite the pressure artists face to follow trends. You have to go and find what feels like you, what comes out of your mouth naturally, and doesn't feel forced, Horan clarified. It requires time. After writing songs that don't fit and pursuing concepts that don't seem right, you finally discover the sound that is uniquely yours. When something isn't genuine, people can sense right away. Horan claimed he had to comprehend his own musical voice in order to transition from the strictly regulated setting of a worldwide boy band to a solo career. Being an artist is so much about knowing yourself well enough to trust what feels right, he continued. People frequently picture flashing cameras, yelling crowds, fancy jets, and a life that feels perpetually dipped in gold when they hear the term global fame. However, Niall Horan learned far more from the realities of superstardom than chart positions or sold-out arenas, particularly at such a young age. Niall has frequently commented on how his time with One Direction molded his personality, anchored his perspective, and eventually taught him something far more important than fame itself: gratitude. Niall's journey from a little Irish town to the world's largest stages is frequently compared to a fairy tale. Beneath the headlines and fan frenzy, however, is a tale of appreciation gained by leading a life that few could genuinely bear, perspective developed under duress, and humility learnt via disaster. The beginning of the storm in a small town, Niall Horan was merely a music-loving adolescent with a guitar and a laid-back smile long before crowds chanted his name. His world as a child in Mullingar, Ireland, was small, comfortable, and based on commonplace encounters. Dreams were lofty but realistic. Music was a passion rather than a business. Niall has frequently stated that after popularity came, that grounding served as his emotional anchor. The pace at which One Direction burst onto the world stage was astounding. Their lives were taken from them in a matter of months. Airports become noise-filled battlegrounds. Instead of being places to relax, hotels have evolved into makeshift shelters. Every public action was scrutinized, significant, and weighted. It was hard for Niall to ignore the difference between his past and his current situation, and it sowed the seeds of thankfulness at a young age. Celebrity at full volume. One Direction's ascent was seismic rather than gradual. Records were broken by album releases. Within minutes, the tour sold out. Fans came from many languages, cultures, and continents. The scale was too much for 5 young men who were just out of their teens. Those were exciting but unrelenting years, according to Niall. There was pleasure in knowing that their music was important to millions of people, joy in performing, and excitement in touring. However, there was also fatigue, confusion, and the ever-present feeling that life was passing more quickly than anyone could comprehend. Gratitude evolved from a trendy term to a survival ability in this setting. Niall has hinted in previous observations that when everything is happening all at once, You either become entitled, or you learn to appreciate every moment before it disappears. Acquiring the ability to not take it for granted the fleeting nature of celebrity was one of the most potent things Niall learned. He came to see that success is a gift rather than a promise. Every radio spot, every crowd, and every chart position were gained with teamwork rather than owed. He gained perspective from being around by those who put in a lot of overtime behind the scenes, such as tour managers, sound engineers, and crew members. He witnessed how many lives went into creating the enchanted atmosphere of a single concert. For him, being grateful meant realizing that achievement is never an isolated endeavor. Niall was constantly conscious that the moment may disappear at any moment, even during One Direction's peak of popularity. Instead of inspiring terror, that insight inspired gratitude. Fans as gratitude teachers, the fans themselves may have had the biggest impact on Niall's perspective. He had never seen anything like the passion of One Direction's fanbase, from heartfelt meet and greets to handwritten messages. Niall has frequently talked about meeting fans who told him very intimate tales of how the band's music supported them throughout times of illness, loneliness, sorrow, or identity issues. The concept of fame ceased to exist in those moments. It turned into a person. Thus, gratitude became about obligation rather than just success. Niall's perspective on his duty as an artist was altered when he realized that music could be so important to another person. It was about connection, not ego. Under pressure, brotherhood gratitude also manifested as brotherhood among One Direction. Bonds that were strong, complex, and profoundly formative were created by living and working so intimately under continual pressure. Niall has admitted that life wasn't always simple. They were all put to the test by lack of privacy, tiredness, and creative differences. However, in retrospect, he expresses gratitude for the lessons those connections taught him about tolerance, compassion, and cooperation. Being a member of a team that needed to compromise to succeed. Listening was necessary. Despite the hardship, it necessitated appreciation for shared experiences that were impossible to duplicate elsewhere. The silence that provided context, the abrupt silence that followed One Direction's sabbatical was startling. And it was enlightening for Niall. He finally had time to consider the significance of those years without the incessant cacophony of international celebrity. Instead of lessening his gratitude, that delay strengthened it. He could see clearly from a distance. He chose to concentrate on his accomplishments rather than his losses, including experience, self-assurance, friendships, and a platform that would influence the remainder of his career. He came to see that being on stage every night wasn't the only way to be grateful. It had to do with realizing how unique and uncommon that chapter had been. Bringing appreciation to a solo career. One Direction's lessons followed Niall when he embarked on his own career. His attitude toward celebrity changed significantly. He became more deliberate, more measured, and more grateful. He talked candidly about savoring the little things in life, such as writing sessions, private performances, and artistic freedom. Although success was still significant, it was no longer the only indicator of contentment. He was able to handle solo success without losing perspective because to the lessons he learned about gratitude throughout his boy band years. Not something to pursue endlessly, fame became something to manage. Redefining achievement beyond statistics. Niall learned another important lesson from One Direction. Value is not determined by numbers. Despite the band's enormous accomplishments, he discovered that happiness comes from more than just breaking records or winning prizes. He learned to prioritize development over approval through gratitude, to honor effort rather than merely results, should value durability over viral moments. He was able to develop as an artist without feeling constrained by earlier expectations thanks to this way of thinking, which is a problem that many artists face with enormous early success. Maintaining your ground in an unreal world. Niall's public character has stayed remarkably grounded despite his widespread fame. He still has strong ties to his family, speaks positively about home, and, whenever possible, cherishes normalcy. He attributes this grounding to having experienced so intense prominence at such a young age. The ordinary gains value after witnessing the extremes. For Niall, being grateful is about surviving, not about projecting humility. It's about recollecting your identity prior to the world's attention. An insightful lesson from one particular era. Niall Horan doesn't romanticize One Direction's success in retrospect, but he also doesn't downplay it. He acknowledges that it was an event of a lifetime that molded him in ways that no other chapter could. The most important lesson was not about fame, fortune, or power. It was thankfulness for the admirers, the chances, the friendships, and even the difficulties that made him mature quickly. He is still guided by that thankfulness not only as a musician, but also as a person navigating a life that is still remarkable in many aspects. Being thankful as a compass. Niall's observations are notable for their genuineness in a field that is frequently motivated by competition and vanity. He learned from fame that nothing is permanent, nothing is assured, and nothing is accomplished by one person. Gratitude became his compass, guiding him through achievement without losing himself, appreciating the past without dwelling on it, and looking forward with humility rather than entitlement.